kids are around. I'm not really afraid of much. I don't think I should go to Ukraine, though. So I'm not going to do that. But I would love to interview Zelensky. He's turned us down. Avenatti's in prison for many years. We did just visit Julian Assange in prison. So, I've interviewed people in prison before, but I don't know if he would sign off on us visiting. We've got a bunch of interviews coming, but you're totally right. And Stelter, that's a tough call. I mean, first of all, I don't want to be in the same room as Stelter. There's something very poisonous about that guy and kind of feline and scary. Alex Jones was absolutely right about Brian Stelter. It's not just that he's wrong. It's that there's a lot of malice in Brian Stelter, a lot of things are repressed in Brian Stelter, but a lot of repressed rage and hatred. And he's a destroyer. I agree with that. But I think we talked to him by remote.
It feels like there's so much malice just in the media in general. I mean, you are one of the people that really, you created Rachel Maddow, right? You brought her on. You gave her a platform. You've worked with Joe Scarborough. You used to work for, some pretty prominent figures in conservatism that have, lost their minds. What's going on there? How'd that malice come about?
I don't know. I suspect it's personal. I mean, I really think your politics grow out of whatever is inside you. And in the case of Joe Scarborough specifically, I mean, I knew him really well, and I always admired his intelligence. He's genuinely smart. He's not stupid at all. Very clever guy, very calculating guy. But I think the burden of things that Joe has done, and I'm not just talking about the murder he's been accused of. I have my views on that. I don't know whether he actually committed it or not. He's been credibly accused of killing a girl. However, I don't know if it's that or some things in his personal life, but whatever it is, that is a hater. He's really transformed from a kind of thoughtful, clever, funny guy who had views to a guy who's just bent on destroying other people. And I think that grows out of the misery inside and the guilt that he feels over the things that he's done in his life, et cetera. And a much healthier way to deal with that, I mean, all of us have done things we feel guilty about, I certainly have, is to admit them and kind of let them fall away, let the guilt fall away, and just move forward as a whole person. But someone like Scarborough just can't do it. And it's bad for the country when people like that have national platforms, I think.
Do you think he's sort of doing become a Democrat spokesperson because there's actually a lot less accountability if you're doing the bidding of the left? I mean, it feels like if you're a conservative, Tucker Carlson, if you were an academic, would not be getting the same treatment at Harvard as Claudine Gay is at Harvard for the same thing, for the same gross incompetence, for plagiarism, et cetera. I mean, is there a life jacket to doing the bidding of the radical left today?
There's no doubt about it, but I think it's bigger than partisan. I mean, it's not just that Scarborough is a defender of the Democratic Party, which obviously he is, that whole channel is, but it's more than that. He's an advocate for destroying things, for destroying families, individuals. I mean, if you're arguing for castrating kids or for appointing like a flagrant moron like Claudine Gay to the presidency of Harvard, the most famous, prestigious university in the world, what are you doing? Well, you're wrecking things. You're breaking things that you didn't build. You are advocating for destruction. If you're pushing some totally pointless foreign war like the war in Ukraine that Ukraine cannot win, then the only real effect is the total destruction of that country and an entire generation of men. And if you're quarterbacking that, even in the face of the dead certain knowledge it won't work, but you're still calling for more Ukrainians to die, what are you doing? Well, of course, you're serving evil. You're serving the destruction of other people and of institutions that were worth having but are now gone. And that's kind of where Joe finds himself. So I think it's deeper than partisan. I think there's something spiritual going on here.
What about Bill Kristol? I mean, you started off, working for him, and he's taken that same approach. But I mean, this is someone that at least at a time would have been a noted conservative scholar. It feels like he's literally, a full blown, not even like, Kennedy type Democrat. He's a full blown radical, Marxist.
He is. And what's interesting about Kristol, he's very much like Claudine Gay. Both are the beneficiaries of affirmative action. Both occupy places they haven't earned and have reputations they didn't earn. And neither one is a scholar. Both are kind of midwits. I mean, Kristol's above average intelligence, certainly not a genius, but neither one of them has ever written a book. Bill Kristol is a scholar. He's a PhD from Harvard, but he's never written a single book. And he's not a good writer. I mean, he had a column for the New York Times, which they canceled because he couldn't write a 750-word column twice a week. So he's not that bright. He's kind of dumb. I mean, he's smarter than most people probably, but he's hardly a genius. He's hardly a scholar. His whole life is a pose, and he's really angry about it. I mean, if you take someone and put him in a position he hasn't earned, he got there because of his dad, of course, Irving Kristol. He was the son of a famous guy. And you put him into this position and you give him accolades he hasn't earned, he knows that. And so he feels bad about himself, and he takes that rage out on other people. And so Kristol doesn't really, I mean, I worked for him for 5.5 years, so I know what he's like. Yeah. And he's a hater. And he absolutely hates Christian conservatives for sure, above all. And once you understand that, you can kind of see what this is really about. It's not about conservatism or helping America. It's about crushing and suppressing certain people because of their religious faith and their ethnicity. That's what he's really about.
Okay, so as someone who perhaps sits in a similar situation, right? I have a father that's incredibly accomplished. He's done things in all sorts of walks of life. How would you view, what's your analysis of me as being different than that? Because you've seen that can destroy certain people. So is my, when I go out there and fight for all these things, I'm curious to see what the Tucker analysis is on that one.
You want an honest analysis? I'll give it
seriously.
to you. So you're born into a family that was famous for business, okay, and had a company with your name on it. Be pretty easy to stay with that. And that's probably not a good thing, actually. I mean, if you're really into it and really great at it, do it. But you did something that is your salvation and the salvation of all of us, which is you followed your gifts and your actual enthusiasms. You're like, the two things I love politics and I love the outdoors. I love hunting and fishing. And you decided to master those, and you had a natural aptitude for it. You left a more comfortable path, which was kind of guaranteed because literally your name's on the company. And you're like, I'm going to go into this thing I've never done before, but I just love it. Your dad runs for president. You get hauled out as a surrogate. You don't have a ton of experience in it. And you're like, wow, this just feels right. I'm really passionate. And that's why you're like a normal person who's not controlled by your insecurities. As distinct from someone like Claudine Gay, who's like, oh shit, I'm the president of Harvard. I'm not very smart. And she knows she's an imposter. Same with Bill Kristol. You're like, no, I love this. It's like
it's interesting.
And people can feel it on you.
People, like, well, it's so brutal, all the investigations. I was like, no. I got a chance to sort of remake myself in my late 30s. Not everyone gets that chance. Yes. So it is uniquely normal. Can you expand on that? Because I do think you're right. That was a sort of a turning point in discourse, but it was also a sort of a flipping of a switch, I think, for a lot of Americans who are finally realizing that everything that they've been told about their country, everything that they've been told they must believe, or they're not a patriot, so much of that is based on a total lie at this point.
I completely agree. I mean, that was the moment that changed my view of everything. And I happened to be out of the country when that happened with my kids. I used to get a week in the summer and a week at Christmas, and that was the week in Mongolia. Mongolia. Hey, well, I'm not going to tell you where I was, but I was, I was with my kids in totally isolated place. And I had been to, my son works in politics. So I've been talking, he's very smart. So I've been talking to my son about this stuff and like, what's going to happen? Is Trump really going to run? Is that real? I'm asking him. And I don't know I don't know. The next day he comes to me and he's reading on his phone. He's like, they just did this at Mar-a-Lago. And I said, this will destroy, this is the thing that will actually destroy the country. You want to end democracy, all this, pearl clutching about democracy. If you want to end democracy, this is what you do. And of course, because we're from Washington and we understand, my dad worked in government, I've been around it my whole life. I understand the classification system and I know what a scam it is. Over 1 billion classified documents. So it's not a democracy by definition. If you can't see what your government is doing, you're not really in charge of your government, are you? No, of course not. And so the fact that they got him on a classification charge was so mind-boggling to me because I know how it works very, very well. I was just stunned. And my first thought was, and I happen to like Trump, as you know, and I agree with him on 90% of his views on things. So I'm aligned already ideologically. But even if I weren't, even if he was saying things that I really didn't like, I'd still, in fact, even if I hated him, which I don't, but I would still be like, no, you can't have that. My kids live here. My grandkids are going to live here. We want to live here anyway. We have nowhere else to go. You can't wreck our system. You didn't create it. My family's been here hundreds of years. So I kind of feel like, sorry to say it, but a little bit of ownership of it. No, this is our country. Stop that. You can't do that. Yeah. And we will end the country if we don't have free and fair elections and a fair justice system. Those are the two prerequisites above all else. That's why people come here. It's not for our financial system and all the Wall Street jerk-offs to compliment themselves. Like, oh, people come here for a banking system. No, they don't. Yeah. There are lots of banking systems. They come here because of the rule of law and the fact that there's a peaceful transition of power. And the only reason it's peaceful is because the population, by and large, thinks it's fair. So it is actually a system that the whole population buys into. That's why it's enduring. That's why we don't have revolutions. And the second you end that, we will have a revolution. Maybe not now, but at some point. If you take people's power away entirely, no economic power, no political power, they will revolt. So you can either put them all in concentration camps or you can prepare to be overthrown. That really is the story of history. So I'm like,
well, but they seem to be trying to do that right now, right? I mean, if you look at the January 6th treatment relative to the Summer of Love riot treatment, you know, Democrats are always, they're out there shouting about protecting democracy and norms. But they're out there also trying to imprison their political opponents. They're trying to censor everyone that they disagree with. You know, what is it with the left and projection?
Well, I mean, that's, I've thought an awful lot about this, and I'm slow to pick up on anything. I mean, it takes me forever to know anything. Like the obvious often eludes me. I think one of my favorite employees is gay, and I love him, and that we've worked together for all these years. I had no idea he was gay for like 3 months, and I said to someone else, "Is he gay?" Yeah, he's married.
Who cares? Yeah, no, only the left actually cares, right? They pretend that you're not supposed to care, but if you don't care, that's a problem.
Like the stuff that's so obvious. Exactly. So, but the point is, this started to happen, and I didn't get it at first. I was like, wait, what they're saying is not simply false. It is the exact opposite. It's the mirror image. It's the inverse of the truth. And not only that, they're accusing me of doing exactly what they are doing. And what is that? And I've decided after many years of watching this that it's evil. That's not dishonesty in the way that normal people lie. That's like a true deception, like you were serving not just the individual lie, but the concept and the force of evil when you do that. I mean, that's like really super dark. And that has awakened in me the sense that something else bigger than politics is going on here. And of course, I'm the last person to really know.
Today, just check the trans box, if you check a couple, POC boxes, all of a sudden you too can be an admiral. We'll give you a submarine. Like, you don't have to know anything about submarines. Who cares? You don't have to know how to dive. Just congratulations.
You're so right. You're so right. I'm just caught in the past. I almost said you have to be smart to be president of Harvard. But anyway, but I do think what helped me was just the mental change. I just decided I didn't want to lie, knowingly or unknowingly. Like the amount of lies that I have repeated without knowing it is just vast and shameful. And I didn't want that to happen to me anymore. And it still happens to me sometimes. Like you don't know you're being used, but you are. But now I'm like so paranoid about that and so focused on that. Just tell the truth. And by the way, if there's something that you really can't say, then just don't say it. But don't say something that's untrue, period. And I think that my decision to do that, I really did it for myself, not to like save the world or something, just because I don't want to live with myself as a liar.
Well, that makes you so different than all the journalists out there, right? I mean, it feels like literally all of the, the journalists who, democracy dies in darkness, Tucker, they're out there doing the bidding of the Pentagon. It's like, wait a minute. Like, is that true? Or did they give you a Pentagon briefing that's designed for a very specific purpose, right?
Well, in the Pentagon, I'm so glad without getting into names, but I would say the most destructive reporters in the entire American press corps, certainly in Washington, are not the ones who are covering for Joe Biden. You can't cover for a senile man. Everyone knows the truth. It's obvious. They're the ones who are covering for CIA and DOD. And I'm thinking of one in particular who I know personally, who's really like an agent of evil. It was lying on behalf of these vast secretive bureaucracies that are hurting our country every single day and knowingly doing that. And I just feel like there's an awful lot of that. The number of national security reporters who are honest is like, I don't know any. I mean, maybe on the, fringe independent media there are, and thank God. But in the regular media, they're all captive to those bureaucracies. And it's scary.
Isn't that terrible? I mean, how did it get this way? It only took 24 years to do it, really, since President George Herbert Walker Bush destroyed our nation put us the first trillions of dollars in debt, and followed by Obama's debt, and followed by the next debt, and COVID, and Biden and Harris, and we're like $200 trillion in debt now. And we passed our inflation off to every country in the world. No wonder why we're hated. And no wonder why the media is hated. And we look like idiots to the whole world because we blab everything we do, every disagreement we have to the whole globe. It's terrible.
Scary, and Americans, and particularly Republicans, have no idea. Like, Republicans are totally on guard for, like, reporters telling them that maybe Joe Biden's not senile. They're like, oh, you're a liar, shut up. But when someone comes out, particularly on a trusted news channel that the right watches, and is like, no, the Pentagon reported today that there were gas attacks in Syria, they just believe it. They totally, they don't know they're being lied to, which is
access,
so
right?
scary.
If you don't do their bidding, all of a sudden your access is out, and then once you don't have that access to them, then you don't bring anything to the table in D.C. anymore. So even though it's been proven over.
Talking about the consequences of World War III, the thing is, he has made very clear that that's where he thinks we are already, that we are in World War III. Ukraine is the tip of the spear. And this is how he justifies making demands of the United States and all of these NATO countries to equip him with all of the weapons and aircraft and tanks that the United States and NATO have to go and fight this war that we are in against Russia. He is doing everything that he can to bring us and NATO into this war, directly into conflict with Russia. You remember when their Ukrainian missile defense system unfortunately had a missile that went into Poland and killed 2 civilians on a farm. What did Zelensky say? His very first thing, first person on camera saying, hey, this is a direct attack against a NATO ally. U.S. and NATO, you must go and attack Russia. The scary thing to me, Tucker, is to hear people like Zelensky, to hear Democrats and Republicans in the United States Congress and Biden administration officials speak so calmly and with a straight face about World War III. Exactly. How would it be won? How would we respond to the use of tactical nuclear weapons? What are our options in this battlefield? Forgetting what Ronald Reagan said when he said a nuclear war cannot be won and therefore should never be fought. This World War III, this path that we are on, unless we change course, it will result in nuclear war. You've all of the nuclear armed countries in the world on this path towards a head-on collision.
May I just ask you a really quick question? So Zelensky, who I think this country has borne with great patience, actually, for the last year, has repeatedly said, I've got a border dispute with my neighbor, Russia. You live thousands of miles away. You're not connected. But because of that border dispute and their invasion of the eastern half of my country, your whole family could die, and I'm okay with that. Yeah. Why aren't Americans rising up as one and saying, you're suggesting it's okay that my family dies? No, it's not okay. Off the stage. Like, why are we putting up with this, honestly?
You look at the lies that the American people are being told by President Biden, by Mitch McConnell, by these warmongers in both parties, selling this lie that this is about defending freedom and democracy. And as he said, there's no greater threat to that democracy than this fight against, this war against Russia. They are the ones who are undermining our democracy. They are the ones who are denying the American people our constitutional right to have a say whether or not we go to war or not. It is an affront to the Constitution and every single American, and we should all be raising hell about this because it is our future, the future of the world, that's at stake.
I agree. I mean, how much weed are people smoking? This is a real issue. This is not one of the fake issues, that we...
There is no more real issue than this.
Oh, I agree. Tulsi Gabbard, thanks so much for joining us
tonight. Thanks, Tucker.